I woke up to a soft knock on my car window. The glass was fogged from my breath. My neck hurt from sleeping angled toward the steering wheel. I'd been parked on that curb long enough that the streetlight above me felt like it was keeping score. When I wiped the window with my sleeve, I saw my grandpa standing there. He wasn't supposed to be in town. He's 75, still straight-backed, still the type to wait in silence until you tell the truth. His knuckles hovered near the glass, like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. I pushed the door open and stepped out, trying to stand like this was normal. The cold hit my face. I could smell old fries from the passenger floor. Grandpa Henry looked past me into the car. He saw the thin blanket, the water jug, the clothes on hangers hooked to the backseat handles. His voice came out quiet, but it shook. "Evan," he said, "what are you doing out here?" I swallowed. I couldn't find an answer that didn't sound like a failure. Then he looked up at the house behind me and asked the question that made my throat close. "The house I gave you," he said. "You didn't like it?" Before I could speak, the front door opened. My mom stepped out in her robe like she'd been waiting for a chance to control the story. She saw Grandpa and forced a smile. And then, like she was explaining something obvious, she said it. "We took it from him," she told my grandpa, nodding toward me. "And we gave it to Marissa. She has kids. She deserves it more." I remember my grandpa's face changing, the way his jaw tightened without him raising his voice. I also remember something small and strange, a folded paper wedged under my windshield wiper, damp at the corners, with a city seal stamped on it. I hadn't opened it. I didn't even know it was there until Grandpa's eyes dropped to it for half a second. He pulled his phone from his pocket, and that's where this really started. "My name is Evan. I was 23 then. I've always been the quiet one in my family. I don't like conflict. If there's a way to smooth something over, I usually take it, even when it costs me. That habit made me easy to push. I grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment outside Columbus. My parents, Darren and Lisa, were both in their early 50s. My older sister, Marissa, was 29, and she'd been the center of everything for as long as I could remember. If she was happy, the house was peaceful. If she was upset, everyone moved around her like she might break. She married a guy named Kyle. He was good at talking, not great at keeping jobs. Marissa didn't work. She said the kids were her job. Their daughter, Nora, was 5. Their son, Caleb, was 3. We all lived together, 7 people, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a living room that never really belonged to anyone. Someone was always stepping over someone else's shoes. There was always noise, even late at night. I worked as an office coordinator at a small freight company. It paid about $1,800 a month after taxes. Nothing impressive, but it was steady. I kept my head down. I saved what I could. My grandpa lived about 2.5 hours away, near Cincinnati. He'd been a businessman before he retired, the kind who didn't miss details and didn't tolerate excuses. When he visited, the whole apartment seemed to tighten up around him. My parents leaned on him for Marissa, constantly. "Marissa needs help," my mom would say on the phone. "The kids are growing. Kyle is trying." Grandpa sent them money every month, more than I earned working full-time. And somehow, it still wasn't enough. There was always a new reason. 3 months before that morning in my car, it was my birthday. I didn't plan anything. I ate a cheap slice of grocery store cake in my car on my lunch break and went back to work. That afternoon, Grandpa called. "I'm coming to see you," he said. "I've got something for you." When he arrived, he walked into our apartment carrying a thick envelope. He didn't look at my parents first. He looked at me. "Sit down," he said. And for once, everyone did. He handed me the envelope. Inside were keys and papers with my name printed in clean, official lines. "It's a house," he said. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, Cedar Ridge neighborhood, furnished. It's in your name. It's yours." I just stared. My hands were shaking. I kept waiting for someone to laugh and tell me it was a joke. My mom's smile froze. My dad's eyes moved to the paperwork like he was already measuring it. Marissa's expression tightened, then smoothed over when Grandpa glanced her way. Kyle stayed quiet. I tried to hand it back. Grandpa, I can't. Yes, you can, he said, calm and firm. You've earned a quiet place to live. I see you trying. The next day, he drove me to the house. It was real, clean, bright, new appliances, a small yard. I stood in the entryway and listened to the emptiness, like the place was waiting for me to breathe. When we got back to the apartment, I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time, it felt like I had a future that belonged to me. That night, my mom waited in the living room after everyone else went quiet. The TV was muted. The kitchen light buzzed. Evan, she said, patting the couch cushion beside her, we need to talk about the house. I sat down anyway, and I didn't yet understand what that sentence was about to cost me. My mom didn't raise her voice that night. She didn't need to. In our apartment, silence could be its own kind of pressure. She sat with her hands folded in her lap like she was about to explain something practical, something responsible. My dad stood near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching me the way he watched Bill's. Marissa and Kyle were there too, hovering like they'd already been invited into the conversation. The kids were in the bedroom, the door half closed, cartoons still playing low. My mom said, "That house is too big for you." I blinked. Too big? You're one person, she continued. You don't have a wife. You don't have children. Why do you need 3 bedrooms? I remember staring at the keys in my palm like I could will them to disappear and end the conversation. I said, It's mine. Grandpa gave it to me. My dad stepped forward a little. We're not saying you don't deserve something, Evan. We're saying it doesn't make sense. Marissa gave a small sigh, the kind that sounded like she'd been patient for a long time. We're all squeezed in here, she said. The kids don't even have space to play. Kyle nodded like he was backing her up, but he didn't look me in the eye. I tried to keep my voice even. You could move somewhere else. Marissa's face shifted. She looked offended, like I'd suggested something cruel. My mom leaned in. Where, Evan? With what money? I didn't answer, because the truth was, I knew. They didn't have savings. They didn't have a plan. They had my grandpa's monthly support, and they treated it like it would never end. My dad said, Your sister has a family. That house would solve a lot. I said, It's in my name. My mom's tone stayed calm, but it went sharper. We're family. Family shares. That word, shares, always came out when someone wanted something from me. I tried to explain, quietly. Grandpa didn't give it to all of us. He gave it to me. He said it was for me. Marissa's eyes watered fast, like she'd practiced the timing. So, you're really going to live in a big house by yourself? She said, while your niece and nephew are stuck in this place? I felt my chest tighten. I looked at my dad for help. He didn't give any. My mom said, Think about the children. That became the phrase they used like a hammer. Every day after that, it was something. In the morning, my mom would make coffee and set a mug down in front of me like an offering, then say, I just can't sleep at night knowing the kids are cramped. At dinner, my dad would bring it up casually, like it was already settled. We should start moving boxes this weekend. Marissa would drop little comments while scrolling on her phone. Nora asked why Uncle Evan gets a whole room for himself. Kyle got bolder over time. It's not like you earned it, he said once, laughing a little like it was a joke. It's just a gift. I tried to push back once, just once. I said, Grandpa gave it to me because I've been working, because I don't ask him for anything. My mom's face went flat. So you're better than your sister now? That's how they twisted it. If I defended myself, I became arrogant. If I stayed quiet, they took it as agreement. After about a week, I stopped talking much at home. I'd come back from work, eat something quick, and sit in my car outside for a few minutes before going upstairs. I'd stare at the dashboard and try to imagine turning the key and driving to my house, just leaving. But I didn't. I kept thinking if I waited long enough, they'd get used to the idea. They didn't. The pressure became routine, like brushing teeth. My mom started saying things like, You'll understand someday when you have kids. Marissa started crying more openly, sometimes in front of the kids. Uncle Evan doesn't care about us, she'd say loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. And then the kids started repeating it, not because they knew what it meant, but because it got them attention. One night, I came home late. The apartment smelled like microwaved chicken nuggets. The living room was dim, only the TV glow moving across their faces. My dad said, "We talked to Grandpa." I froze. "You did what?" My mom didn't look guilty. "We hinted. We didn't ask directly. We just explained the situation." Marissa added, "He loves us too, Evan." I felt heat in my ears. "What did you say to him?" My mom shrugged. "The truth, that the kids are suffering here." I wanted to call my grandpa right then, but my hands didn't move. I hated the idea of turning it into a fight. I hated the idea of being the reason people were angry. That's the part I still remember clearly. Not the yelling. There wasn't any. Just that familiar feeling of my own hesitation being used against me. 3 weeks in, I was exhausted. My appetite was off. My sleep was light. At work, I kept rereading the same emails. My manager asked if I was okay, and I said I was just tired. Then, on a Friday night, my mom sat me down again. This time, she had papers on the coffee table, printed listings, moving checklists, school district maps, like they'd already moved into my future without asking. My dad said, "You can do the right thing here." Marissa said, "If you loved us, you wouldn't even hesitate." And I felt myself slipping into the old pattern, the one where peace mattered more than fairness. I stared at the keys in my hand for a long time. Then I heard myself say it, quietly, like I was agreeing to a chore. "Fine," I said. "Let Marissa have it." No one hugged me right away. Not at first. There was a pause, like they were making sure I meant it. Then everything changed at once. Relief on my mom's face, my dad nodding like I'd finally matured, Marissa crying in a way that sounded like victory. Kyle actually smiled at me, wide and quick, and I sat there, still, with the keys in my palm, feeling something in me go hollow. That weekend, they moved fast. Too fast. Boxes appeared out of nowhere. Marissa's kids ran through the apartment squealing, shouting, "We're getting a house!" like it was a prize they'd earned. My mom started packing kitchen stuff like she'd been waiting for permission. On Monday, Marissa asked for the keys. I handed them over. And that night, after everyone went to bed, I sat on the edge of my mattress in the smaller bedroom and stared at my phone. I hovered over Grandpa Henry's contact name for a long time. Then I set the phone face down. And I didn't call him. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. By the end of that week, the apartment felt wrong. Not because it was suddenly empty, because it wasn't. I still had my room, my bed, my work clothes hanging in the closet. But the place had this stripped, temporary feeling, like the life I'd lived there had been erased in a few days. Most of the furniture was gone. The kitchen cabinets were half bare. The air smelled like cardboard and dust. My mom had said casually, "You can stay here for now. The lease is paid through the month. You'll be fine." She said it like she'd done me a favor. Marissa and Kyle moved into the house immediately. My dad helped carry boxes like he was moving into something he deserved. The kids ran from room to room shouting, doors slamming, laughter echoing down the hallways. I didn't go with them. I stood in the parking lot and watched their cars pull away, then walked back up to the apartment alone. I remember rinsing a single plate in the sink and realizing it was quieter than I'd heard our place in years. 2 nights later, I came home from work, and my key didn't turn. I tried again. Same result. The lock felt different, tighter, like someone had deliberately chosen it. I leaned in close, thinking maybe I had the wrong key, even though I didn't. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I stood there with my work backpack on my shoulder and the hallway light buzzing above me. I called my mom. It rang until voicemail. I called my dad. Voicemail. I tried Marissa. The call didn't even ring. It went straight to a dead stop like I'd been blocked. At first I just stood there. I kept thinking someone would open the door and tell me it was a mistake, that they'd forgotten to tell me something, that this was one more stressful, moving week miscommunication. A neighbor across the hall opened her door a crack and looked at me like I was suspicious. "Are you okay?" she asked. "My key isn't working," I said, still trying to sound normal. "Did you see my parents today?" She hesitated. Then she nodded toward the stairs. "Landlord was here this morning. He changed the locks." My mouth went dry. "Why?" She shrugged. "I don't know. They were talking about ending the lease. I just overheard." I walked down the stairs fast. My hands were cold and shaky even though the building was warm. Outside, I called the landlord. He answered on the second ring, cheerful, like he'd been expecting me. "Yeah," he said after I gave my name. "Your mom and dad told me you all were moving out. They turned in notice, paid the closing fees. The unit's already rented to someone else." I couldn't speak for a second. I heard a car pass behind me on the street, tires hissing on damp pavement. "I still live there," I finally said. There was a pause. "Well, I'm sorry," he said, slower now. "I have paperwork. They told me they were the leaseholders. They said you were moving with them." I stared at the building, at my second-floor window. My old curtains were still there, but they weren't mine anymore. I ended the call and stood on the sidewalk for a long time, not moving, like if I didn't move, the situation might reverse itself. Then I opened my car door and sat inside. It was a 15-year-old sedan with a cracked dash and a faint smell of oil. The driver's seat sagged in the middle. I'd always complained about it. That night, it was the only place I could be. I drove without thinking and ended up in front of the house that should have been mine. The porch light was on. I could see movement behind the curtains. A TV glow. Someone walking down a hallway. I parked across the street, not directly in front. I didn't want to look like I was making a scene. I didn't want anyone opening the door and turning it into an argument on the lawn. I reclined my seat and folded my jacket into a pillow. That first night, I didn't really sleep. I drifted in short, uneven pieces. Every time I woke up, my neck hurt worse. My mouth was dry. My fingers were numb. In the morning, I drove to a gas station and washed my face in the bathroom sink. I used paper towels to smooth down my hair. I brushed my teeth in the stall because I didn't want anyone watching. Then I went to work. I sat at my desk and answered emails and scheduled deliveries like my life hadn't just been shoved into the backseat of my car. I told no one. Not because I was trying to be strong, but because I didn't know how to say it out loud without sounding pathetic. That became my routine. Park near the house, sleep in the car, wake up early, clean up in a public bathroom, go to work, pretend I was fine. A week passed, then 2. At some point, I started keeping a small bag in the trunk with extra clothes, a cheap gym towel, a plastic bin for food. I learned which gas stations were clean enough to wash up in without feeling worse afterward. I bought a cheap windshield shade so people couldn't see in as easily at night. I told myself it was temporary, but temporary stretched. One night, about a month in, I saw my dad through the front window of the house. He was sitting in what I recognized as the living room, his feet up, drink in hand, laughing at something on TV. That image stayed with me. Not because I hated him in that moment, because it looked so normal, like they'd stepped into my life and it fit them. I kept thinking about Grandpa Henry, about his face when he handed me those keys, how proud he'd looked, how certain he'd been when he said, "It's yours." And I kept not calling him. I told myself he was older. He didn't need stress. I told myself it would sort itself out. I told myself I'd find an apartment soon, and then explain it calmly, like it was already resolved. But my savings ran down fast. After my car insurance, my phone bill, gas, food, and a few small things, there wasn't much left. I tried looking at cheap rentals, but everything wanted a deposit and proof of current residence. I didn't have either. I started eating less, not dramatically, just smaller, cheaper, quietly. 2 months became 3. My back hurt constantly. My sleep was shallow. Some nights I woke up and didn't remember where I was for a second. And then, one Saturday morning, just before sunrise, I heard a knock on my window. It wasn't aggressive, just firm, patient. I opened my eyes and saw a silhouette outside the glass. I wiped the window and my heart seemed to stop. Grandpa Henry, standing there, looking down at me like the world had shifted under his feet. That's when the story I'd been hiding ended, and the real one began. I stepped out of the car, trying to speak. My throat wouldn't cooperate. Grandpa's eyes moved from my face to the back seat. The blanket, the clothes, the water jug. His voice went low. "Evan," he said, "tell me what happened." Before I could answer, the front door opened behind him. My mom stepped onto the porch, robe tied tight, and forced her voice into something bright. "Dad," she said, "what a surprise." And Grandpa didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on me. Then he reached into his pocket for his phone, and I watched his thumb hover over the screen like he already knew exactly who he was going to call. Then I waited. I didn't try to explain everything at once, not because I was protecting anyone, but because my throat felt locked. I could feel my face burning, the way it does when you're trying not to cry in front of someone you respect. Grandpa Henry looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once, like he'd decided something. "Get in the car," he said. I hesitated. "Grandpa, Get in," he repeated, calm, firm, not loud, just final. I slid back into the driver's seat. He walked around and sat in the passenger seat like he belonged there. The car smelled like stale coffee and cheap soap. He didn't comment on it. He just looked forward at the house. My mom came down the porch steps fast, like she was trying to stay ahead of whatever was happening. "Dad," she said again, softer now. "Let's talk inside." Grandpa didn't turn his head. He pulled his phone out and opened his contacts. I saw his thumb move with a steady confidence that made my chest tighten. Then he said quietly, "I'm going to do this in order." My mom froze. "What are you doing?" Grandpa finally looked at her. His eyes weren't wild, they weren't theatrical, they were tired and focused. "Step 1, he said. "I'm confirming what's legally true." My mom swallowed. "Dad, it's family, it's not—" Grandpa lifted one finger, not to threaten, just to stop her. "Step 2, he continued. "I'm securing the property and the paperwork." Then he looked at me. "Do you have the documents I gave you? The deed copies?" I stared at him. They were in the apartment, in my drawer." Grandpa's jaw tightened a little. He looked back at my mom. "You took those too?" he asked. My mom's mouth opened, then closed. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. Grandpa nodded, like he'd expected it. He tapped his screen and made a call. Not to scream, not to threaten. Just a clean call, the way you call when you're arranging something that's going to happen whether people like it or not. When someone picked up, Grandpa said, "Good morning. This is Henry Caldwell. I need 2 things. I need a patrol unit sent to this address, and I need the responding officer to note a potential illegal occupancy and interference with property access." My mom's face changed. Panic moved across it fast. "Dad," she started. Grandpa kept speaking into the phone. "The property is in my name and my grandson's name. The occupant is not the legal owner. My grandson has been locked out of his residence. I have reason to believe documents may have been taken." He listened for a second, then said, "Thank you. We'll be outside." He ended the call and put the phone back in his pocket. My mom leaned toward the car window. "You don't understand," she said, voice tight. "Marissa has kids. Evan agreed. We didn't steal anything." Grandpa looked at her like he was looking at a stranger who happened to share blood. "He agreed," Grandpa repeated slowly. "Under pressure." "It was a family decision," my mom said, desperate now. "We all talked about it." Grandpa nodded once. "I'm sure you did." Then he opened the car door and stepped out. I followed, more slowly. He stood on the sidewalk in front of the house, hands at his sides, posture straight. He didn't pace, he didn't yell, he just waited. The porch light flickered off. Someone inside must have seen him and flipped a switch. The curtains moved. A moment later, my dad opened the front door. He froze when he saw Grandpa. "Henry," my dad said, forcing a smile that didn't land. What brings you? Grandpa held up his hand. Where are the deed copies? He asked. My dad blinked. What? The documents I gave Evan, Grandpa said. Where are they? My dad's eyes flicked toward my mom. My mom stepped closer, speaking fast. Dad, you're making this bigger than it needs to be. The kids are asleep. We can talk calmly. Grandpa said, You locked him out of his apartment. My mom's voice cracked. We had to. The lease was in our name. We couldn't keep paying for it and the house and… You weren't paying for the house, Grandpa said. His tone stayed even. I paid for the house. My dad tried a different angle. Evan didn't want conflict. He said it was fine. Grandpa's eyes moved to me. I didn't speak. I couldn't make words come out clean. But I nodded once, small. Grandpa turned back to my parents. He's quiet, he said. That's not consent. That's vulnerability. The front door opened wider. Marissa stepped out behind my dad, hair messy, one of the kids' blankets draped over her shoulder like a shield. When she saw Grandpa, she immediately started crying. Grandpa, she said, voice shaky, please don't do this. We're finally settled. The kids have rooms. Grandpa didn't react to the tears. He watched her, steady. Did you know he was sleeping in his car? He asked. Marissa hesitated. Just a fraction. My mom jumped in. It wasn't like that. He could have come inside. He chose… Grandpa's head turned sharply, not violently, just fast. Don't, he said. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't even loud. But it landed. My mom stopped talking mid-sentence. Grandpa took one slow breath. Here are the rules, he said, like he was reading from something that had been in his head the whole time. 1. Evan is the legal owner with me. That means access and control belong to him, not to you. 2. If you took documents, you return them. 3. You do not speak for him again. My dad's face tightened. Henry, you're blowing this up. It's family. Grandpa nodded slightly. Family doesn't leave a working kid sleeping in a car. Marissa took a step forward, still crying. He could stay with us now. We'll let him in. Right now. Grandpa looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, You already showed me how you let him in. The street was quiet. Early morning quiet. You could hear a distant truck engine, a dog barking somewhere down the block, the soft clicking of a sprinkler starting up 2 houses away. Then, in the distance, I heard the sound of a siren. Not close yet, but coming. My mom heard it too. Her eyes widened. Dad, she whispered, please, think about the children. Grandpa's voice stayed steady. I am thinking about children, he said. I'm thinking about the one you raised to believe he should accept being erased. The siren got closer, then cut off abruptly as the police car turned onto our street. 2 patrol cars pulled up and parked along the curb. Doors opened. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting lightly at their belts, faces neutral, professional. Grandpa walked forward immediately, calm, like he'd done this before. Good morning, he said. I'm the one who called. The officers listened. Grandpa explained in plain sentences, without emotion. He pointed to the house. He pointed to me. He described the lockout at the apartment and my sleeping situation. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't editorialize. One officer asked, Do you have documentation showing ownership? Grandpa nodded. Yes, in my briefcase. He walked to his car, which had been parked around the corner, and returned with a worn leather folder. He opened it on the hood of the patrol car, careful with the edges like the paper mattered more than pride. The officer leaned in and read. His partner stood a few feet back, watching my family. My dad tried to speak. Officer, this is a family matter, he agreed. The officer held up a hand. Sir, give us a moment. Grandpa watched the officer review the papers. His face didn't change. He just stood there, hands clasped in front of him, like patience was a tool. My mom looked at me with sharp panic, like she wanted me to fix it. Marissa clutched the blanket tighter and kept crying, louder now, like volume could replace facts. Kyle finally appeared behind her, rubbing his face, eyes narrowed, scanning the cops like he was deciding what kind of man he needed to be in front of them. The officer finished reading and looked up. "Okay," he said. "Here's what's going to happen." And I felt the air shift, like something official had finally entered the story, something my family couldn't talk their way around. The officer turned slightly so he could address everyone at once. "Based on the documents presented," he said, "the legal owners are Mr. Caldwell and Evan Caldwell. The current occupants are not listed as owners. This is a civil matter unless there are additional allegations, but we can require a peaceful vacate to restore access to the legal owner." My mom's voice cracked. "You can't make us leave." The officer kept his tone firm and calm. "Ma'am, you have 1 hour to gather essential belongings and vacate. After that, you will be trespassing." Marissa made a sound like she couldn't breathe. My dad started talking fast. "Officer, we have nowhere." The officer repeated, 1 hour. Start packing." Grandpa didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just looked at me and said quietly, "Stay beside me." I did. We stood in the yard while my family moved in and out of the house in frantic loops. Bags, suitcases, laundry baskets, stuffed animals, random stacks of papers. Marissa kept crying. Kyle swore under his breath. My mom kept trying to talk to Grandpa like he was still her safety net. "Dad, please," she said. "At least talk to us. At least—" Grandpa didn't answer. He stayed still, arm resting lightly across my shoulders, like he was anchoring me in place. At one point, my dad walked out holding a small stack of envelopes. I recognized my name on one of them. My throat tightened. "That's—" Grandpa saw it too. He stepped forward and took the envelope from my dad's hand without force, just certainty. He looked at the front, then he handed it to me. I held it like it was fragile. The city seal stamped on the corner matched the damp paper I'd seen under my windshield wiper earlier. I didn't open it yet. I just stood there while the hour ticked down, watching bags pile up on the sidewalk. And when the officer glanced at his watch and nodded toward Grandpa, Grandpa looked at me again and said, "Now we verify everything they touched." Then he looked at the front door, waiting for the last person to come out. When the hour was up, the yard looked like a rushed garage sale. Suitcases, trash bags, a laundry basket full of toys, a cardboard box with kitchen knives sticking out at odd angles. My sister's kids sat on the curb, confused and sleepy, holding stuffed animals and wiping their faces with their sleeves. The officers didn't rush anyone, but they didn't soften the rule either. They stood there with neutral expressions, watching the last few trips in and out of the front door. Kyle came out last, carrying a backpack and a plastic bin. He glanced at me once like he wanted to say something sharp, then thought better of it with 2 uniforms a few feet away. My mom stepped forward again, voice thin. "Dad, please, we'll go, but just don't do this to us." Grandpa Henry didn't argue with her. He didn't debate her logic. He just nodded once toward the officer. The officer said, "Okay, we're going to restore access now. You'll need to leave the property." My dad's shoulders sagged. My mom stared at Grandpa like she couldn't understand how control had slipped out of her hands. Then Grandpa did something I didn't expect. He turned to the officers and said, "Thank you. I'd like to change the locks today. Is there any reason my grandson can't do that immediately?" The officer shook his head. "No, sir. The legal owner can secure the property." Grandpa nodded. "Good." My mom's head snapped up. "You can't change the locks. We have mail in there, the kids' things." Grandpa looked at her, calm. "You had 5 months to think about my grandson's things." That was the closest he came to anger. Not in volume, just in precision. He turned to me. "Do you have your ID on you?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Good. We're doing this clean." He pulled his phone out again and called a locksmith. He didn't explain it like a dramatic move. He spoke like a man making an appointment. Today, he said. As soon as possible. Yes, I'll meet you there. Bring new locks for front and back doors. He ended the call and put the phone away. My mom stepped closer, trying to lower her voice like she could make this private again. Evan, she said, tell your grandpa to stop. You know this is too far. I looked at her for a second. My mouth felt dry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't plead. I just said, you ended the lease and changed the locks on me. My mom's eyes narrowed. We didn't mean... You didn't answer my calls, I continued. My voice stayed steady, even, almost flat. You blocked me. My dad tried to step in. Evan, you know your mother panicked. The move was stressful. Things got out of hand. Grandpa turned his head toward my dad slowly. Out of hand? He repeated. My dad's eyes dropped. Marissa stood on the sidewalk with her face blotchy, holding Caleb on her hip. Nora leaned against her leg, thumb in her mouth. Marissa said, he said we could have it. Grandpa didn't look at her at first. He looked at me. Did you sign anything? Grandpa asked. I shook my head. No. Did you tell me you wanted to give it away? He asked. I swallowed. No. Grandpa nodded like that completed a checklist. Then he finally turned to Marissa. If he didn't sign anything, Grandpa said, and he never told me, you knew it wasn't yours. Marissa's crying became louder. But I'm his sister. Grandpa's tone stayed calm. That's a relationship, not a deed. Kyle scoffed quietly. This is ridiculous. One officer glanced at him. Kyle looked away. My mom tried again, voice shaking. Dad, please. If you cut us off, the kids will suffer. Grandpa didn't react to the emotion. He did something else instead. He stepped slightly away from the group and motioned for me to come with him, a few feet closer to the driveway. Not far, just enough to be clear that he was speaking to me, not to them. He said softly, I want you to do the talking now, not because you owe them, because you need practice. I stared at him. I don't know what to say. Yes, you do, he said. You just haven't said it before. We walked back toward them. The officers stayed where they were, watching, giving space but still present. The morning air felt sharper now, like it had woken up. I stood on the front step of the house, my house, and looked at my family. My mom's face was pulled tight with panic. My dad looked tired and annoyed at the same time. Marissa looked furious under her tears. Kyle looked like he wanted to blame someone, anyone, for his own emptiness. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to punish. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. So I said it in plain sentences, like I was reading off a simple list. This house was given to me, I said. It's in my name and Grandpa's name. You moved in without my permission. You ended my lease and locked me out. I slept in my car because I had nowhere else. Marissa opened her mouth to interrupt. I kept going. I'm not debating whether you needed space, I said. I'm stating what happened. My mom said, we're your family. I nodded once. I know. Then I added, that's why it hurts that you did it. My dad tried to soften his voice. Evan, we can fix it. We'll work something out. You can stay here too. We can share. I looked at him and said, no. It came out simple, not loud, just firm. Kyle laughed once like it was unbelievable. So what, you're just going to throw kids out? Grandpa spoke immediately, calm and cold. They're leaving because their parents put them in someone else's house. Kyle's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. My mom started crying again, real tears now. Dad, please, at least keep sending the monthly money. We can't... Grandpa held up his hand again. Not dramatic, just a stop sign. I'm going to say this once, he told her. Listen carefully. Everyone went quiet. Even Marissa's crying dropped into sniffles. Grandpa said, I supported this family because I believed it helped the children, but you used the money to avoid responsibility, and you used my grandson's kindness to take what wasn't yours. He looked at my mom and dad first. You are his parents, he said. Your job was to protect him. Instead, you sacrificed him to keep your daughter comfortable. Then he looked at Marissa and Kyle. And you two, he said, built your life on what other people handed you. Marissa shook her head. That's not fair. Grandpa nodded slowly. Life doesn't care if you think it's fair. My dad's voice got sharp. Henry, you can't just cut us off like this. We're family. Grandpa's eyes stayed steady. Evan is family. He turned slightly and placed a hand on my shoulder again, grounding me, like he was reminding everyone who he came for. Then he said, From today forward, the monthly money stops. There will be no more deposits, no more emergencies, no more calls. My mom's face went white. Dad! Grandpa didn't move. He added, If you contact him, if you show up here, if you try to pressure him again, I will document it, and I will handle it the same way I handled this. The officer beside the patrol car shifted his stance slightly, like he understood what Grandpa meant without needing extra words. Marissa started sobbing again. We'll be homeless. Grandpa didn't argue with her. He just looked at Kyle. Get a job, he said. 2 jobs, if you have to. Kyle's face flushed. He opened his mouth, then shut it. My mom reached toward me, a step closer, eyes desperate. Evan, please. Just help us until we find somewhere. You can't leave your niece and nephew like this. I looked at her. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed even. I didn't leave them, I said. You left me. My mom's mouth trembled. She looked like she wanted to collapse into guilt and still be comforted by it. I didn't comfort her. I stood there. I let the silence do its job. A few minutes later, the officer said, All right, you need to go. My family began gathering their bags. Marissa pulled the kids closer. Kyle muttered something to himself. My dad lifted 2 suitcases without looking at me. Before my mom turned away, she said quietly, You'll regret this. I didn't respond. Grandpa did, without raising his voice. No, he won't. Then the locksmith's van turned onto the street and slowed in front of the house. The driver stepped out, holding a toolbox, and looked at Grandpa. You the caller? He asked. Grandpa nodded. Yes. Then he looked at me. Come with me, he said. I followed him to the front door as the locksmith set his tools down, and for the first time in months, I stood inside the entryway without feeling like I was trespassing. The locksmith started working, metal clicking softly. Grandpa leaned in and said, After this, we check what else they changed. I nodded. He glanced toward the kitchen counter where a stack of papers sat unevenly, like someone had sorted through them quickly. Then he looked back at the door and said, First, you open that letter with the city seal. I took the envelope out of my pocket. My fingers paused on the edge. Then I opened it. The envelope was damp at the corners from being under my wiper so long. The paper inside was stiff and official, folded into thirds. I unfolded it slowly, not because I wanted drama, because my hands were still unsteady, and I didn't want to tear it. At the top was the city header and a case number. Grandpa leaned over my shoulder, close enough that I could smell his aftershave. Clean, familiar, steady. The locksmith's tools clicked behind us like background noise in a different life. The letter wasn't about the house. It was about my car. A notice of abandoned vehicle, final warning. It said that a neighbor complaint had been made about a vehicle parked overnight repeatedly on the street. It listed my license plate. It listed dates. It said if it continued, it would be towed and impounded. I stared at the dates. They were accurate. A quiet timeline of my nights, written by someone I'd never met. Grandpa read it without changing his face. Then he said softly, So even the street was starting to push you out. I didn't answer. I just folded the letter back once, then again, like folding it could make the past smaller. Grandpa took it from my hand and slid it into his folder with the deed copies. Not as evidence for court, necessarily, just as part of the record, part of the truth. He said, Now, we don't guess, we verify. He walked into the living room and looked around like he was evaluating a property for purchase, not a family betrayal. The furniture was mine, but it had been rearranged. There were extra toys, extra blankets, a stack of school forms on the coffee table. He said, "Do you see anything missing?" I scanned the room. My brain went blank at first, the way it does when you're asked to inventory your own life. Then I noticed an empty spot along the wall. "My desk," I said quietly. "The one Grandpa bought me for my first office job. It's gone." Grandpa nodded once. "We'll list it." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, one of those old-fashioned ones with a pen clipped into the spine. He wrote down, "Desk, oak, left wall." He wrote like he was recording storm damage. Then he said, "Anything else?" I looked again. The TV was different. Not missing, just not mine. My family had replaced it. The shelves had been reorganized. My small framed photo from high school graduation, gone. I said, "My documents, the folder in my drawer, the deed copies, my birth certificate copy, my tax papers." Grandpa wrote, "Documents removed." He didn't ask who took them. We both knew. The locksmith finished with the front door and moved to the back. Grandpa watched him work, not because he distrusted the man, but because he understood something simple. Whoever controls the locks controls the peace. When the locksmith was done, he handed me new keys. They felt heavier than keys should. The officers stayed long enough to watch my family finish leaving the curb area. My mom kept looking back at the house. My dad kept his eyes forward. Marissa was still crying, but now it sounded tired, like her throat hurt. Kyle walked with his shoulders tight, carrying bags like they were someone else's problem. They didn't have a plan. You could see it. My grandpa didn't offer one. The officers eventually left. One of them said, "If they return and refuse to leave, call us. Document it." Grandpa thanked them the way you thank someone who did their job well. Then the street got quiet again. It was just us. Grandpa turned to me. "Go inside, pick a room, put your things down." I walked through the house slowly, like my feet didn't trust the floor. I opened a bedroom door and saw kids' posters taped to the wall. I stood there for a second, not angry, just stunned by how easily my space had been overwritten. I went to the next room. It was half empty, boxes pushed against one wall. A closet full of hangers that weren't mine. I didn't start ripping things down. I didn't want to do anything in a rush. I picked the smallest bedroom first, not because I needed it small, because it felt like a safe place to start. I set my backpack on the floor and sat on the edge of the mattress someone had moved in there. Grandpa walked in behind me and stood in the doorway. He said, "We're going to handle the next steps like adults. No emotion, just process." I nodded. He said, "Step 1. You're going to update your mailing address and secure your identity." I looked up. "Identity?" He nodded. "They had access to your documents. We don't assume they use them. We make sure they can't." He pulled out his phone and opened a note. "Step 2, he said. "We're going to get copies of everything. Birth certificate, tax records, employment documents. Monday morning, we go to the county office. I'm coming with you." I swallowed. "Okay." "Step 3, he said. "We document what happened. Not for revenge, for protection." He looked at me. "You're going to write a simple timeline. Dates, facts, no commentary. Starting the day they pressured you to hand over the keys. Ending today." I nodded again. My stomach felt tight, but the tightness wasn't panic this time. It was something closer to relief. Like order was finally entering a place that had been chaos. Grandpa added, "Step 4, boundaries." I didn't speak. He said, "They will call. They will text. They will send long messages about the children. They will blame you. You don't argue. You don't explain. You don't negotiate." He paused. "You decide the rule," he said, "and then you follow it." I sat there quietly. I could feel the fatigue in my bones, but underneath it was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Stability. That afternoon, Grandpa made food like it was normal. He found coffee in the kitchen and brewed it. He wiped the counters. He didn't talk much. He moved through the house like he was restoring it to its intended purpose. At some point he asked, "Do you want a shower?" I nodded, embarrassed. "Yeah." He pointed toward the hallway. Go, take your time. I stood under hot water for longer than I needed. I watched the water run down the drain and thought about the fact that I didn't have to calculate where my next shower would be. When I came out, Grandpa had left clean towels on the bed. He'd found my spare set of sheets in a closet and made the bed properly, corners tucked in tight. That night, I slept in a real room with a real door. I woke up once, confused, reaching for the steering wheel that wasn't there. Then I realized where I was. I lay back down and listened to the quiet. The next morning, my phone started vibrating. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages. My mom first, then my dad, then Marissa from a new number. The messages followed the same pattern. They were sorry. They were desperate. The kids were scared. They needed help. They had nowhere to go. They wanted to talk. A few minutes later, a longer message came in from my mom. It was carefully written. It sounded like she'd rewritten it several times. It said she understood they went too far. It said she was my mother. It said family shouldn't be abandoned. It asked me to meet them somewhere public, just to talk, just to work out something reasonable. I stared at the screen for a long time. Grandpa watched me from across the kitchen table, coffee in his hand, calm. He didn't tell me what to do. He just said, "If you answer, answer with rules, not emotion." I took a slow breath and typed one message. 1. I wrote, "I'm not meeting. Do not come to the house. Do not contact me again. If you need housing, speak to a social services office. I'm not involved." I read it twice, then sent it. My hands shook afterward, but it wasn't the same kind of shaking as before. It felt like I'd finally used a muscle that had been asleep for years. Then I blocked the numbers, all of them. Grandpa nodded once, not proud, not congratulatory, just satisfied that I had chosen a line and held it. He said, "Good." 2 days later, he took me to the bank, not to show off money, to remove any shared access my parents might have had from when I opened my first account as a teenager. We updated passwords, we set alerts, we turned on two-factor authentication, then we went to the county office and requested replacement documents. Each step was boring, administrative, quiet, and that was the point. By the end of the week, the house felt less like a disputed object and more like a home. I moved the kids' posters into a box and placed it in the garage, not to be cruel, just to clear space without destroying anything. I cleaned the kitchen, I vacuumed, I opened windows. Grandpa stayed 2 more nights. On the last evening, we sat at the dining table with a small stack of paperwork in the middle, my timeline, copies of requests, notes of phone numbers used to contact me. He looked at me and said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it carefully. Then I said, "Tired, but clear." Grandpa nodded. That's what we needed. He stood up, rinsed his mug, and hung the towel neatly. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folder. "I'm leaving this here," he said, setting it on the table. "It has deed copies, the locksmith receipt, and your timeline. Keep it in a safe place." I opened it and saw everything arranged in order, like a quiet shield. Grandpa said, "Next is the part nobody enjoys." I looked up. "What part?" He said, "They'll try one more time, a public meeting, a story, maybe even a lawyer letter, something to make you doubt yourself." He paused at the doorway. "When it happens," he said, "you don't react. You verify." Then he left me in the quiet house with my keys and my folder, and a calm, steady feeling that this was no longer something I had to beg for. And that evening, as I was locking the front door for the night, I saw a car slow down at the curb. Not stopping, just slowing, like someone was checking if I was alone. I waited until it passed. Then I turned the deadbolt twice and set my phone face down on the counter. The first real morning in the house felt almost ordinary. That's what I remember most. Not the shouting, not the police cars, the ordinary parts that came after. I woke up before my alarm out of habit. The room was dim and still. No traffic noise through thin apartment walls, no cartoons from the next room, no footsteps, just quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened for a minute, like my body was checking whether it was safe. Then I stood up, made the bed the way Grandpa had shown me, simple, tight corners, and walked to the kitchen. The light coming through the window looked clean. I filled the kettle and put it on the stove. The small click of the burner turning on felt strangely comforting. I leaned against the counter while the water warmed, and I let myself breathe in a way I didn't even realize I'd stopped doing. After tea, I did something I'd never really done before. I made a list. Not a dramatic one, just normal tasks. Change address with employer, update driver's license address, buy groceries that aren't gas station food, schedule a dentist appointment, get a basic toolkit, replace the shower curtain. I walked room to room and started clearing the house slowly. Not with anger, not with urgency, just with routine. Posters came down and went into a labeled box. Toys were gathered into a bin. Extra bedding folded and stacked. I didn't throw anything out. I didn't want to feel like I was doing to them what they did to me. I just wanted my space back. By midday, the house was quieter in a different way, more neutral, like it was resetting. I wiped down the kitchen counters. I swept the front porch. I picked up 2 small trash bags from the yard, wrappers and tape from the move-out chaos, and tied them off neatly. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a victory lap. It was just life returning to order. My phone stayed quiet for 2 days after I blocked everyone. Then, on the 3rd day, an email came through from an address I didn't recognize at first. It was my dad. He'd made a new email account. The message was longer, more polished, and it ended with a request to meet and resolve this like adults. He mentioned the kids. He mentioned forgiveness. He mentioned how families fight and make mistakes. I didn't reply. I followed Grandpa's rule. I verified. I checked the email header and saw it was exactly what it looked like. Just another attempt to reopen a door I'd finally closed. No legal document attached, no actual plan, just pressure dressed up as reason. I archived it. Then I created a filter so anything from that address went straight out of sight. That helped more than I expected. When you stop receiving the pressure, your thoughts come back. You start hearing yourself again. A week later, I had enough money saved to buy a cheap folding table and a chair. I set up a small corner in the dining room and turned it into a workspace. Nothing fancy, just a stable place to sit and handle the boring life stuff that used to overwhelm me. I called my manager and updated my address. I updated my bank account settings again. I put the deed copies in a safe folder and stored it in a locked drawer. One evening, I heard a knock at the door. My stomach tightened automatically. My hands went cold. But it wasn't them. It was a woman from 2 houses down holding a piece of mail. "I think this got delivered to you by mistake," she said. "Sorry." I thanked her, took the envelope, and shut the door gently. Then I stood there for a second, noticing something simple. I didn't feel unsafe. I just felt alert, like an adult in my own home. Later that week, Grandpa Henry called me. He didn't ask about my parents first. He asked about my sleep. "You eating real food?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Actually cooking." He paused. "Good." Then, after a beat, he said, "I need to tell you something." His voice stayed calm, but it had that edge of concern he rarely showed. "There's a kid at my old church," he said. "Not a kid. Young man. 21 maybe. Quiet like you. Works hard. His mother has been using his paychecks to cover her boyfriend's debts." I didn't say anything right away. I just listened. Grandpa continued. "He came to me after service last Sunday, asked if I knew how to make it stop without ruining the family." I understood that sentence in my bones. Grandpa said, "I didn't give him advice yet. I told him I'd think. But I wanted you to know. What happened to you wasn't rare. People like you get targeted because you're steady." I looked around my kitchen while he spoke. The clean sink, the kettle, the simple order. And I realized something else. I didn't just want to be protected anymore. I wanted to be capable. I said, "If he wants to talk, I can talk to him." Grandpa's voice softened. "That's what I thought you'd say." After we hung up, I made tea again and sat at the table with my list. I added one more line at the bottom: keep boundaries, always. That night, I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and stood for a moment in the quiet living room. No anger, no victory, just calm. I went to bed, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't rehearse imaginary arguments in my head before sleeping. I just slept. If you've been through something like this, or you're in the middle of it, I'm glad you're here with me. And if you want to keep listening to stories like this, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel reach more people who need a quiet place to think. Also, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I always read them, and it's honestly comforting seeing how far these stories travel. 2 more popular stories will appear next, so you can just keep listening if you want.